All right, so we're gonna get started. Good evening, everyone. I hope we've had a great day. Our guest facilitator is already here on the call. So I'm just gonna give a brief introduction and we can move on. Mr. Ishaya Bako is here with us and he's a director who's gonna take us today on the director's craft. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us here have seen some of his movies. They're amazing. Like movies like Lionheart, Road to Yesterday, Fourth Republic. I remember that Road to Yesterday was actually the first movie I watched of his. And it is my hope today that from this session, we take away a concrete and diverse understanding of the type of homework that we need to do as directors, because oftentimes I think most people who aspire to be directors don't really have an idea of the work that they need to do to succeed artistically first, before even commercially, right? So I really hope that we come out of this with a really, really good understanding of the work that we need to put in and do. And so a bit about the film and theater community. This is the film and theater community, and it is an initiative of the Covenant Nation. We have our sessions, our general sessions every Sunday. In the past, our sessions used to focus on the journey of the artist, right? But we decided that this time around, we want to focus on the craft of the artist as opposed to the journey. And once again, welcome everyone. So Vincent, who is also here on the call, is a co-host. Vincent will be helping you, Ishaya, throughout the course of this. It's basically going to run like a class, right? So in a class, people can have questions while the teacher is teaching, right? And that can sort of be, we pause the class to answer the questions before you move on. Vincent to be there to help out with the moderation. If there's any question you're missing, he can point that out to you. And he'll just be there to bring sort of like law and order to everything we're doing today. It's gonna be a fun time. So I hope you're ready, and thank you so much. Welcome, Ishaya. The floor is yours now.
Thank you. So I don't know how to pronounce your name. I don't want to murder it. Can you just tell me how to pronounce your name?
Oh, Besidone.
Besidone. Oh, where are you from?
Delta States, yeah.
Besidone. Okay.
Yeah, we're actually Eagles, you and I.
Oh, nice. What year? What year did you graduate? Can you hear me? Okay, I don't know if
looks like the little young child.
Sorry?
Bessie, what year did you graduate? Eagle.
What?
Asking what year you graduated.
Anyways, I think since the connection is a bit bad, I could just start. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. And thank you, Dipo, for inviting me to this. And I suppose like you've already given me high jump in terms of the list of things that I need to go through as a director. But I suppose like just for context, it would have been good to kind of go around. But I see that there are 23 people and it might take a bit of time. But just for context, I suppose like I would ask the class first, like kind of what are the main differences between a director and a producer, so that at least we could start from there, and then we'll just like move on to the details of the craft of a director is different from the craft, like pretty much the craft of a director in terms of filmmaking. So like, can anybody just tell me like what, I hear that you had a session with Lala Akindoju last week. So can someone tell me about like the differences between a director and a producer?
Okay. Hi, Ishaya. So she mentioned my name. My name is Vincent. So before we do that, so the class doesn't get rowdy. So is there anybody that want to answer Mr. Ishaya's question? Person should raise their hand. Okay, Amy, you have the floor.
Okay, good afternoon, sir. I would say that a director.
Can you just start by introducing yourself and then like tell me what you're interested in film as well?
Okay, my name is Amy Josephs. I am a screenwriter. I'm currently transitioning into producing. Okay. Okay, so a director is the person with a vision. When I say vision, I mean like he's the one that has, it's safe to say he's the one that has the beginning of the film to the end of the film and it's playing in his head. While the producer, I would say, is the manager. It's the one that makes sure that everything that the director has in his mind, everything that he has in his head comes to fulfillment. So if he wants to get creative, if he wants to blow up a car, the producer has to make sure that he gets the car that he wants to blow up. And of course, if it's within his budget. While the director, as I said earlier, is the one with the vision of how the film should go. So more often than not, you want the director to be less burdened with which car are we blowing up, which people are doing this, who is doing that, just getting the producer getting the people that he needs to, bring to life the vision that he has for the film. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Emmy. I mean, it's a close answer. Like, could be a clearer delineation. Does anybody else want to take a shot? You could raise your hand. Everybody's scared now. Yes, Samuel. You can unmute yourself, Samuel. I think I saw your hand first. Samuel Sadiq.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon, how are you?
I'm fine. Nice to see you again. Mentor at the IREP training.
Nice.
Yeah, okay, so I'm a producer. So just I'm also a director. It's okay. Oh, so my understanding of the two, or should I say a comparison of the two, is a director is a creative head of any project, or any film project, be it a documentary or a film. Creatively, it draws out the whole pattern of which the technical team should follow, from color palettes down to artistic intuitions, down to camera directions, and down to post-production and all the rest of it. I mean, he kind of creates a cinematic detailing of what the script has to offer. It creates a cinematic detailing of everything. While a producer is a business, should I say business? If I call him a manager, I kind of reduce his work. But I think a producer is more than a manager in all sense. He's a, should I say, he's a major stakeholder, a business director, let me put it that way. He plans, do logistics before and after even production, and down to the distribution level and all that. So while the director is creatively involved in trying to build or create a story that will tell the audience the story, the producer is logistically, financially, everything that has to bring the body and the soul of the film together from the start, from the very start to the very end, where the film is when the film is out to the public. I think that's the little I know about this. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you, Samuel. JK, I think so that we move it on quicker. I think for what Samuel has said, and even Daisy, who's just put something on the chat. JK, I'll let you speak in a second. I think a clear delineation is that a director is the creative lead in terms of a film project, and then a producer is more an administrative stroke business lead. More often than not, the producer is the person that hires the director. But obviously, in terms of kind of creative projects, there is that, almost if you look at it as a Venn diagram, there's that cross-sectionality in terms of the, sometimes, and depending on the type of director that it is, the roles of the director intersect with the roles of the producer. But as Samuel rightfully said, like the producer is involved in all kind of logistics and administrative aspects of the project, which involves like hiring the crew, getting finance for the project, getting the script itself, hiring the script writer and getting the script, all the way to distribution and recouping the financing for the film itself. While the director is pretty much, and to forget the first lady that mentioned about like the director having the vision of the film. So the director now is the person that's like the creative lead in terms of taking the script and creating something cinematic, something visual, something that reaches an audience through the various distribution channels that there are. And it's important to kind of start with this because more often than not, people kind of don't know that difference. And that is, first of all, that main difference between a director. So the director pretty much supervises the creative and the technical team. So all the heads of departments. So whether you're talking about the cinematography, the director of photography, the sound, the art department, costumes, makeup, and most importantly, the performance. That's kind of what the director's job is kind of to navigate all of that. So to coordinate, more often than not, they will tell you and would say like a director is like a conductor. It's more like a catalyst. You're trying to coordinate all these various departments to bring the script to life. And as you know, every project starts with a screenplay. Every project starts with a script, and that's kind of your building block, your blueprint, if you will. You're not going to build a house without a blueprint, without a floor plan. And the script is that's your bare bones, that's where you start from. And then it's the director's job to now break it down and communicate with all the various departments and coordinate that in terms of visualizing that and breaking all the components of what you need to take it to film. So as I said, Deepa has given me a long list of things, of focus areas to go. So I'll try and just go through each bullet points one after the other. Like you could raise your hand if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions. I think the first thing is understanding the story as a director. So I think the main thing with directing is you are thinking visually. It's show not tell. The very difference between say writing like prose or a novel and a film is that a film is visual. Like you have that for a director and like for a storyteller, because at the heart of it, you're a storyteller. You have literally all the various disciplines in terms of literature, in terms of theater, in terms of music, at your disposal, in terms of photography in particular as well, because like that's pretty much what you're doing. Like it's when film first started, that's what it was called. It was motion pictures. It was pictures in motion. And it was that trickery of persistence of vision. So showing a frame going 24 frames, showing a picture every 24, showing 24 frames of a picture every second, which is kind of where the motion picture camera started, and then the Nickelodeons and the Cineplexes, and which is where film industry was born. So at the heart of it, like a director is a visual storyteller, that's it. And you're going to employ all of these centuries. So whether it is literature literally from the Greeks to Shakespeare, all the way to like the modern day Scott Fitzgerald, Chinua Achebe, whether it is performance in terms of theater, which also predates film, whether it's music in terms of composition, and obviously in photography, as I mentioned, in terms of capturing this performance, you are literally taking all of these different various art fields and you are putting them together to create a cogent narrative to reach an audience, and to captivate them. And I think that's kind of the beauty of film. And I think that's why all of you are here. Like you appreciate film for just the escapism for it. So whether it's Game of Thrones that you're watching and it takes you to this fantasy world, whether it's a documentary that you're watching that is telling you about like real life people. So whether it's Tinder Swindler that you've just recently watched and it's telling you about this man that has swindled people, and that is has happened. Like literally you're creating an argument. That's what a film is. It's like a visual argument that you are putting together over a period of time to like put to an audience. So, I mean, I think the first thing, like understanding the story as a director is like, the first thing you're looking at is, how is this a visual story and how am I telling it? And as I often like to say, like every time you're approaching a project is 2 questions you need to primarily ask. Does this story need to be told? And am I the best person to tell it? And these are the questions that should guide you all through the process of going through the project itself. So like in looking at the story, you're looking at, okay, is there a story here? Has it been told before? If it's been told before, why am I telling it? Okay, it's been told before, but I can tell it different. I can tell it better, you know? And that's at the heart of it, that's where your craft comes in as a director. That is where your purpose comes in. That is where your relevance comes in. It comes into the fact that, okay, you see this as a relevant story to be told, and you say, I am the best person to tell this story, and then you go forward and do it. The second thing is talking about scene breakdowns. So I'll talk about, before scene breakdowns, I'll talk about the script, because at the heart of every story, as I mentioned, is the script. So whether it's an adaptation you're doing, whether it's a documentary you're doing, whether it's fiction, you need to start with the script. And I want to believe everybody on this class has seen what a screenplay looks like. Yes? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir, we have.
yeah. So
Yes.
there is the industry format for screenplays. And it's a certain typeface. It is Korea, size 12. There is the slug lines, which is your exterior, interior, where your location is. There is your description, which is like just a short description of what the action is, and then there's dialogue. Now the thing about the way that screenplays had been formatted, and literally they have created that industry format, is because, as I mentioned earlier, your screenplay is your blueprint. Your screenplay, it is your document, is your first building block in creating that film, and is the document that you're going to use to communicate with the various departments. And the various departments use the screenplay for different reasons. So obviously, like your script supervisor is making sure that the actors are saying the lines that they need to say. Your director of photography, your cinematographer, he's looking, or he or she is looking at the time of day. So whether it's exterior, interior, the time of day, so that they can prep for the lighting that they would need for consistency. Your arts departments and your props, they're looking at what props are in there. Same thing with costumes, makeup. They're looking at, okay, what kind of continuity is it over the course of the story? And the idea of film is that it runs in real time. So as opposed to like a book that you can switch between the past and the present, film is it's present continuous. So if you're writing, whether it's a treatment or a script, it is present continuous. And the reason why it's present continuous is because you're putting yourself in this position of the audience, and the audience is watching the film happen like in real time. So even if there is flashback, the flashback is still happening present continuous. So once you have a script, and as I said, there is already an industry format for it. You now and it's broken down. It literally is broken down into scenes. The general idea of it is that 1 page of script equals 1 minute of screen time, and that way, particularly for the producer, they're able to kind of break it down and say, okay, you know what, we cost it, because essentially how you move into or how you start to make a film is that you have that script, you break it down, and then you start to schedule your shooting days. So you could schedule it based on actor availability, location availability, the complexity, how technical the scene is going to be. For example, if you have if you have an action sequence, you know that, okay, you need a bit more time to shoot that, as opposed to just a dialogue sequence between 2 people or 3 people. So pretty much how you literally how you step to start to go through that is you make sure that, okay, you understand the sequence of the film, and pretty much you break it down in terms of so it's the way I look at it is you have your scenes, and then you have your sequences, and obviously you have your acts, and then the whole film. I want to believe people know about the 3-act structure. This is pretty much from play, but it's also been moved into film as well. So the 3-act structure is literally just your beginning, your middle, and your end. And every story needs to have that. And at the heart of it is that this is a rule, and it's a rule for good reason, because if I'm telling you a story, so whether it's Gatananku or story, once upon a time, and then there lived this is what happened to the person, and then this is how it ended. So whether it's the tortoise, how did the tortoise have its shell broken? They will tell you once upon a time, the tortoise did this. He went upstairs, he went to heaven, he had the rope, the animals got angry, they cut it, the end. And that's kind of, especially even how we grew up, and how stories are told, that completion is very important, that you have a beginning, you have a middle, and you have an end. And the idea of it is that literally you have a first act. Normally for a 90-page script, they tell you that from page 1 to page 30, that is your first act. From page 30 to page 60 to between 60 and 80, that is your second act, which is the middle of the story, which is where the main conflict comes. And then the last act is now either from page 60 to 90 or from page 70, 80 to 90, which is your conclusion and your end. And pretty much how you start to break it down is you look at each act first to say, okay, look, this is making sense. This beginning makes sense. This middle makes sense. This end makes sense. And it's often very good to also send the script out to people that are knowledgeable in the field. So whether it's filmmakers or whether it's people that are novelists, or people that understand story, to kind of give feedback. And that's something, sadly, that is sorely missing in our industry. Asking for feedback, particularly in the script stage, because that's the best place to actually get feedback, because that's the cheapest points in time that you can actually change the story and it can make a material difference. Because at the heart of it, if the story is not making sense on the script, it's not going to make sense in the film. I'm not going to mention the name of the film, but then I'm sure all of you know, at the beginning of the year, there was a film that came out on Netflix from a big studio that's pretty much everybody did, and they panned. And obviously, from the script stage, there were already problems. And if they had gone through the process of actually getting proper feedback for it, reviewing it, making those changes in the script, they would have solved the issue before it gets to the audience, and then everybody tears it apart and starts being angry at the filmmakers. So essentially, again, your screenplay, very, very important. And it's something that we overlook, but it's also something that you need as much time as possible to get that right. It's very, very difficult to make a bad film from a good script. But there's if you have a bad script, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you have a bad film. So moving on, literally, as I said, you have the full script or the full film, you break it down into acts, you break the acts down into sequences, and then the sequences into scenes. And then once you've broken down your scenes, so you have from scene 1 to maybe scene 90, scene 100, you now look at each of them and now say, okay, you know what, because literally each scene, and let me follow because this thing. Each scene is one block. Think of it almost like either building a Lego tower. Each scene is a block that goes up, and you're pretty much piecing all of it together, and then you further break down the scene into shots. And the shots, the idea of shots is literally, what are the images? How do you want to capture the sequence? How do you want to capture the scene? There's the French idea that had been posited, the mise en scène. So the mise en scène is pretty much how you navigate the scene, where you place the camera. Where you place the camera is pretty much where you place the audience. And there are 3 general shots. There are 3 general shots that you follow. There are 3 not that you follow. There are 3 general shots that you use, every filmmaker uses on a film. So there's the wide shot, there's a medium shot, and a close-up. And they're all the variations of that. So there is the we call it the ultra wide shot. There is the extreme close-up. There's the medium close-up, there's the medium wide. But essentially, wide shot, as the name implies, is like an establishing shot. So it's when you're speaking with your director of photography, like with the lenses, you have like the wide lenses and the telephoto lenses. So the wide lenses are like lenses from pretty much from 10 millimeters to about 24 millimeters metric, where it pretty much captures the widest scene. As it says, the medium shot is slightly tighter, and then the close-up shot is even tighter. And these are the shots that you use to kind of break each scene down. And I suppose like now, is everybody following me so far? Does anybody have any questions before I now go into like blocking and like camera movements and motivations? Any questions?
So if there's a question, you raise your hand.
Fantastic, no questions. So pretty much once you have your script and your screenplay, and I suppose maybe also what I'll try and slightly deviate, like, and just speak about the relationships between the director and like key members of his crew. Because like, as I mentioned at the beginning, like the director is that creative lead, and the director is pretty much like navigating the conversations between pretty much all the heads of departments. So your first point of call and your first relationship obviously is your producer. So that's the person that is organizing your finance. That is the person that is looking big picture. That is the person that's taking away all the logistic choices or decisions from you, and just trying to make sure that you have all the resources you need to make what you have work. So obviously it's a very, very important relationship. And I think that's the thing that's maybe overlooked, because like directors do get the reputation of being very stubborn, but they're also stubborn for good reason, because like there's a lot of responsibility placed on you on set. You are the person that everybody is asking questions. So your actors are asking you about performance. Your sound person is asking you about what you want to do with the scene. Your DOP is asking you about like, camera movements and whatnot, your costumes. So literally you're being bombarded with questions left, right, and center. So it's essentially important that you prepare. And it's also essentially important that you communicate very, very well. Like the communication, I cannot overemphasize, and you foster these relationships with your key heads of departments. And as I said, first and foremost, starting with your producer, because you have a good relationship with your producer, pretty much you're able to shoot your film like on time and under budget. The next person, depending on how you look at it, like is either your art director or your cinematographer. They are equally as important. Your art director pretty much is the person in charge, or your production designer. So it's production designer, art director, kind of interwoven or intermittently, or interchangeable in terms of their roles and responsibilities. Your art director is in charge of the look of the film. So they're in charge of like the colors, the color palettes, and obviously you have to have that conversation with them in terms of what feel you're going for, what color palette you're choosing, the reasons behind that. And negotiating that is also kind of what makes a better relationship and a better film. And obviously the kind of props that go into the film, your costumes, your makeup, that's sometimes you separate it from art department. I think that they're all together with the art department. So that relationship on what is in the film outside of the actors, that is your art department. So all your props, your action props, your vehicles, that is your art department. And then obviously the cinematographer, who is pretty much your right-hand man or woman, your right-hand person, and the person that literally captures the film. That relationship is essential, because like that is how you develop the visual style, the visual look of the film. That is how you select the kind of shots you want to do, the kind of movements, the look and the feel of the film, like how it's captured, how it's lit. For the very, very good cinematographers, they're literally painters with a camera and lights. And some of the best relationships between director and cinematographer just creates those evoking images. And that's what, when we talk about cinematic, that's what cinematic is. Like it's how you paint a scene with light. And then obviously your sound recorders. Now sound is often overlooked in many cases, but then it is very, very important. And you would see this especially more in documentary than in fiction. Nigeria is a difficult place to shoot because more often than not, like we don't shoot in the studio, like very, very few, unless like you're like an eminent telenovela like Tinsel, and even with them too, they also do a lot of location shooting, but we don't really shoot in like a controlled sound environment. We shoot mostly on location. And as you know, location, like if you sit down outside and just listen, you would realize how noisy. So whether it's your generator that is on, there's a church that is doing service, there might be a school next door that is also doing that, there's a call to prayer in the corner. Those things are very, very important. And as I mentioned, like it even becomes more important with documentary, because like with documentary, and if you look at some films, if you have bad picture, if you have like a shaky camera, if there's good sound, it's kind of forgivable. But if you have bad sound, you don't know what is going on. And it's more often than not, it's very, very like distracting, and it ruins the experience for the audience. So sound, very, very important, very, very crucial. And as I mentioned again, at the heart of it is also your relationship with your actors, because like everybody else on set is focusing on a particular aspect of the job. So your script supervisor is focusing on making sure the actors are saying the lines. Your cinematographer is making sure that, you know, the camera movements is good. You're choosing the right lens and the shots, the lighting is good. Sound person is making sure that the sound is good. Art department is making sure that the props are okay. The walls, if they painted it or wallpaper, you know, it looks all right. It is the director's sole job to watch the performance. It is the director's sole job to guide the artists and the actors to give the performance that kind of evokes the story, that tells the story. That is with every scene, with every shot, with every take that you have. And it is the director's job to give like that feedback to the actor that, okay, I want you to do this. I want you to think about this. I want you to feel this. And for at that heart of it, like especially for the production side of it, that those relationships are very, very key and very, very crucial for every director to have and to make sure that it's positive, because the more you foster those kind of positive relationships, the better your film is. And then obviously you now come into post-production, where it's the editing. And that's where you now start to talk to your editor in terms of how you want to piece the film together. In our edit studio, we have like a big banner that says the film is made 3 times, in the scripts, in the shoots, and in the edits. And that's just something that is good to know, because like oftentimes you're, as I said, again, like I said, your building blocks, your blueprint is your script. So that's where you start to see the idea of the script come to, the film come to life. The idea of the film comes to life in that script, in that 120 pages, that 90 pages that you read through and you're like, oh yeah. But oftentimes when you go to shoots, like when you're now on set and you're shooting, things change. The lines doesn't feel as good as you felt it would be. The actors are like suggesting some changes, or maybe you don't even have time, or even when you are rehearsing and you're blocking the scene, you are now like saying, okay, I want to change this, I want to do this. So pretty much those changes happen in shoots, and most of the time you have to be tactile to those changes. And the edit is that point in time where you now realize, okay, this is what we have. How do we make the most of it? And I think there's a famous Scorsese quote, Martin Scorsese quotes, that says that if you are not physically sick by the time you see the first cut of your film, something is wrong. And that's where the work pretty much also continues, because like when you finish shooting the script and then you are there at the edit, you now start saying, I wish I'd taken another take of this, or I didn't even notice that continuity is off. The glass was half full here, it's half empty, or hopefully not in a worst case scenario, an actress is wearing a different wig than they wore in a different scene, and that kind of thing. But you now start to it is in the edit that you now start, like pretty much you're piecing the film together. And oftentimes it's also like in the edit that magic happens, that you start to, feel it, like that rhythm, you're building the rhythm. And it is that relationship with your editor that you also have to foster. And then your sound editor, your music composer, in terms of like finalizing and finishing the film, and then colorist, and grading. And obviously by the time you get into distribution, like the producer kind of takes over with that. The director can be as involved as best as they want to be. But then it's at that point in time the producer goes, but then pretty much the film is not finished until it gets to an audience and it reaches an audience, which is important to note. So those relationships are at every stage of production, and there are pretty much 4 stages, well, 5 stages of production. There's like, the first stage of production is development. So development is not something that we do a lot here, but then now we're trying to do it a bit more. So development is pretty much where you are developing the story. So development is where the script is being written. It's when you're putting together like a business plan or business proposal for the film. You're looking at what actors you want to do, you want to put in the film. You are doing like script workshops. And yeah, it's pretty much like where you're developing the script and you're raising financing for the film. That's development. Pre-production is when you start, like you have a final script, or at least you have a working script that you can go out and you start your location scouting, you start casting actors, you start like crewing up. So you start like hiring for all the various departments. So for lighting, for camera, for sound, for art department, costumes, makeup. And that's also like your main planning stage for the shoot itself. And then you have production, which is the shoot, which is when you, principal photography, as we call it, which is where you now go out on location or in sets and you start to shoot the film. And then after production is post-production, which is your edits. And then post-production, after post-production is your distribution, which is when your film gets out there. So yeah, so those are like pretty much the 5 stages of filmmaking. And in a certain way, obviously, like once you start to build a career, it becomes a cycle, because at the end of distribution, you now start going into development on your next project. Or if you have a sequel, or it's a TV series, you're going into the next set of development for the project itself. So yeah, and then, so that said, now I'll now talk about like blocking a scene and the mise en scène. Like, how do you break a scene down? So different directors have different practices, and I would recommend that you obviously like listen to as many interviews as possible. If you can register for masterclass. Masterclass has like some really interesting courses from people like Spike Lee. Casey, I've just seen your question. I'll answer you in a second. People like Spike Lee, James Cameron, yeah, like all the top directors, they're like great. And like every director has like their own style and their own vision. There are the rules to know. It's okay to break the rules. For example, when I talked about the 3-act structure, there's act 1, act 2, act 3. People like Quentin Tarantino would break the rules where he would start from act 2, jump act 1, but it only makes sense that you break the rules if you know the rules. And so like it's not one of like, I know that especially with the creative, with us creatives, you want to be the rebel, you want to say, oh, I want to do it like this, I want to do it like that. But if you don't understand why a rule exists, when you break it or you subvert it, oftentimes there are things that are missing that you don't take into consideration. So it's obviously very, very important to like understand the rules of why you need a 3-act structure, a beginning, middle, and end. For scene blocking and for when you're working with actors within like a set, I suppose like the main rule, and that's mostly like the conversation with your director of photography, is like there's a 180-degree rule. The idea of the 180-degree rule is that once 2 people, it would have been really good to like put this on and maybe like after this, like I could send like an image about the 180-degree rule. If 2 people are talking and you put the camera on one side of them, the idea of the 180-degree rule is that you do not move the camera to the other side. So as I'm sitting down like this, if there's someone opposite me and I put the camera to the left, and they're talking, and it's taking them in a wider shot or a medium shot where both of them are talking. Now, if I'm going in for closer shots, I need to just create a line, like an invisible imaginary line between the 2 of them, and the camera will always stay on that line. So at any point in time I'm moving the camera to behind someone, to face another person, or a close-up shot on any of them, I need to pretty much stay on that axis. The reason for this is that it is, especially for eye line, it becomes disorienting if you move to the other side. So literally, if I'm looking, now I'm looking directly at you, but if I'm talking to someone and I'm looking like slightly, I don't know, I'm looking, at least for me now, I'm looking to my left. I suppose for you, I'm looking to my right. If you flip it and the person is also looking in the same direction, it looks like they're talking to someone completely different. And that throws the audience away. And that's what I mean by rule. So like, that's the reason why like a rule like that exists. Casey, so Casey, your question is, as a director, who's your first contact? Is it the producer or your first assistant director? Your first contact is definitely your producer, because it's your producer that hires you. It's your producer that you would have first seen the script from, or at least talked about the story idea with. And the assistant director pretty much doesn't come until onto your pre-production stage, which is when you're about to start going into set. Your first assistant director is pretty much the floor manager of sorts, or the set manager. He or she is the person that like coordinates making sure that you shoot all you shoot all the scenes that you're scheduled to shoot for that day, and making sure that the people that need to be on set are on set, both crew and cast. So in terms of breaking mise en scène, like how you navigate through a scene, as I said, there are different methods. Like the way I like to do it, like, is first going, like, being on set, like with the HODs, so with my art director, my cinematographer, my sound recordist, maybe costume and makeup, depending on how, and then we play it out. Like, we just have the actors act out the scene, and literally like do it as many times as possible, in terms of like just act it out real. Sometimes they don't even have them in the costumes that they need to wear at the time, and even at that point in time, it literally is just like, oh, guys, like, everybody keep quiet, like, this is the performance. And even for actors, it also helps them, because like the thing with film is you're just doing things over and over and over again. So you will rehearse it, you start to shoot it, and you are now going to be shooting from different angles, which is kind of where the blocking comes in. And there's blocking is two forms. So there's the actor blocking, which is now how they move around within the scene. So if for example, if they're in a living room and someone is shouting and the person stands up and is shouting, and you can now say, okay, you know what, I don't want you to stand, I want you to sit down and shout, and I want the other person to stand up and walk away. And there are all the different ways that you can like kind of navigate how the actors move, how the actors like deliver their dialogue, what emphasis, what words you want to emphasize, what the power play is, because oftentimes that power play is also very important between the actors for performance. And you want to keep that sacrosanct, because you kind of get the best performances that way, when the actors are not necessarily thinking about like, oh, where the camera is and whatnot. And then once you do that, and then the actors are like very comfortable in terms of the actor blocking, then you now have your technical blocking. The technical blocking is now when you bring your camera and your sound in. And yeah, and I think that's obviously also when things kind of get a bit complicated. Sometimes you have markers that you need to put on the floor. And this is also where the more experienced actors pretty much earn their money. And pretty much the reason why they are professionals, and they do the things that they do, because you're going to ask them to, for example, say, oh, you're going to walk to this point, is at this point you deliver this particular line. And the reason why is because the camera is going to come at this angle, is going to either wrap around you or come directly to you. So the technical blocking is now when you're now getting the camera involved. You're also getting the sound involved, because you don't want your microphone, either it's a boom mic or radio mic, you don't want your microphone to be showing. And you also want to capture as much good sound as possible. And then if there are any like practical things that need to happen, so for example, if you have gunshots and you have squibs that you need to either remotely control or pull and let the blood come out, you need to rehearse that. or if it's a situation where you want to say, oh, they've taken lights. So even like the lighting cues, you need to rehearse that. So that kind of how you block that is also very, and rehearsals are just always very important because like that's the only way that you could kind of get it right. And then you also now start to talk to your director of photography, and for you, which is where I'll now come and start talking about the shot list. You start to break down the scene into shots. So you now say, okay, once you watch the actors move around and perform, you're now going to ask yourself, okay, so how do I want to capture this? Where am I placing the audience in terms of telling the story? When do I want to be far away? When do I want to be close in? And then how is this going to cut together? And oftentimes you're literally going to shoot the entire scene from one particular angle, depending on your budgets, depending on your shooting style, depending on pretty much logistics. You might have 2 cameras, you might have even more than 2 cameras, particularly for action sequences. It's always good to have more than 1 camera. But then also some directors like to have just the 1 camera because that way they're able to like be very specific with how they want to capture a scene. And as I mentioned, the 3 main shots that you have in every film is like your wide shots, your medium shots, and your close-ups. And then you could also add movements, and that's the beauty about cinema, is that you can now, and the technology has even become even better in terms of like lighter weight cameras. You have the gimbals, so whether you're using a Ronin or like steady cams were like the standard for a while, but now we have Ronins. Some people still prefer steady cams, or you can have tracks, and then you have that movement within your scene. And it's always a great motivation, it's always a great cinematic technique in terms of like almost pulling the audience in. And different directors have done different things. Like, for example, Steven Spielberg, particularly with Jaws, which was, I think, 73, 74, with the dolly shots, like this to show danger, like where the back of the character stays in the middle, but then it's almost like the back of the person is expanding. So that's like a reverse dolly shot. And the way they do that is that they have a zoom lens on the camera when they're zooming in, when they're tracking in. So tracking in is actually moving the camera in a particular direction. So as they track in, they zoom out, and it kind of creates that kind of expanding effect. And once you see a shot like that, and if people have seen that film, it completely translates the danger that the character is in. And then there are obviously like the ideas of like, slapping the camera. Spike Lee does that a lot. The snorri cam, where if a character is running, they literally would rig the camera in front of the person, and then you see the jerking. Guy Ritchie too does that a bit. You see the jerking. So all of these techniques are tools that you have at your disposal. Sometimes it works. And this is where your craft now and how you hone your crafts now becomes very important. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just looks like a gimmick. It just looks like you want to show that I can do camera work. But then oftentimes it is also like making sure that there is a motivation for doing this. So there's a motivation for moving the camera, and this is something that I always have like conversations with my DPs. Like, if we're going to have a move within the camera, there has to be a motivation. Like is there a certain relevance for this particular scene? Is there certain relevance for this particular character? Is there certain relevance for what this character is actually saying that would necessitate the movement of the camera within the scene? And then, yeah, and so that idea of it is like, again, like how you break down the scene into the different shots. So if you watch your actors perform and you now say, okay, you know what, I want a wide shot first, which is an establishing shot. Like, unfortunately, like, and I've heard this, like, you have a lot of, and especially with like more telenovelas that are around, you literally just have a, give me master, give me over the shoulder, give me over the shoulder. That's it, let's go. And to be fair, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just very boring, as you would imagine. But then in terms of, and this is where I'll now dovetail into coverage, in terms of whether it's capturing the essence of the scene, like, I suppose like it does, because like you are able to cut from the wide shots or a master shot, which kind of shows where they are, it situates you, and from an audience point of view, you also want to know, have a sense of where you're situated. And then you now have like the over the shoulder peers. So over the shoulder peers is like putting the camera over, especially if it's just, the idea of it is just two people talking. So putting the camera over someone else's shoulder to see the next person talking, and then a reverse of that. And then when you get into the edit, you now start to cut it, piece it together. But obviously, like there are now, like there's so many different ways that you could capture a scene, like there's so many different ways you could say, okay, you know what, I want to start from this person talking and track back. As I'm tracking back, I'll see the person he's talking to, and then a third person comes in before I cut to a different shot, and that's where, again, this is where your skill as a director comes in. And this is where it now also becomes very, very important to watch films. Like that's the heart of it. Watch as many films as possible. Like take notes on what is great about them, what is not. Sorry, 1 second. How did they do the shot? I mean, like you would see, like with directors just doing like pretty intense, amazing things. Like the director of The Revenant, who said he only wanted to shoot in natural lighting, and oftentimes had like very long takes. Obviously, the budgets for those things are huge, and they're trying to make a particular mark. But I think even with us, like they again, because the technology has kind of made cameras more accessible, has made, even like with the editing software, like you could even test stuff out, and that's something I will always encourage people to do, is like test as much as possible. Like carry a camera out, shoot. If you want to even do like a green screen thing, if you want to do like some VFX stuff, like test and see whether it's working. And if it's not working, then that, okay, at least I tried it. Yeah, and then coming back to coverage is that when you're shooting, when you're taking different shots within a scene, you want to have enough variation to kind of make it interesting. I'm not saying that, and especially now that attention span is pretty low, and I'm not saying I do like music video style where it's like cut here and there, because it gets jarring. But say, for example, they're talking about like a ring or a, I don't know, like a dog or a puppy or something, like, and you want like different shots of the items that are there. You may not use it, but then the idea of coverage is that you are capturing the scene from as many different angles as possible. The pro of that is you are obviously like have more options to play with. The con, or the obvious con, is that it takes more time to finish shooting a scene. And depending on how your production is, like that might become a problem for you. But then it's always very good. Like it's just good practice, especially when you're starting out. It's just get as much coverage as possible. Have your safety shots. If you have an idea that you wanted to do, but it might be a bit too complicated, try and just maybe push that to the last or to the end. Shoot all the basic shots that you need to actually cover the scene, to tell the story within that scene. And then you can now try the extra shots if you have that, if you have the time. And yes. So yeah, and in terms of like, even when you're putting together your shot list, there are different ways that you can do it. There is there are all these different softwares now. So whether it's Studio Binder, Celtics, I think does it as well, where you have like a shot list breakdown, or you could just do it by hand. I like to do it my this thing by hand. So I literally would read a scene and then like just break it down. Say, okay, from this line to this line is a medium shot, and there's a wide shot, and then maybe a jib down or a track in to do this. Just in terms of, okay, how, where, and again, the idea of it is, where am I placing the audience in telling this, how am I making this exciting? How am I making this interesting and different? Yeah, any questions so far? No questions, great. And then now, so I think at this point, I will now talk about like actors, like casting actors and your relationship with actors. I've touched on it earlier on, but then I'll just throw more emphasis on it, because as I mentioned before, that relationship between director and actor is pretty much sacrosanct. It is the make or break of it. Like they oftentimes, like even actors will tell you that like it's not there is no bad performance, there's only bad directing. And that's pretty much it's almost a truth. Because again, the director is the only person really looking out for performance. And looking out for what, because you are directing the action, you are directing the performance. And yeah, I mean, like there are obviously different reasons for why you cast an actor. And again, coming back to the relationship that I talked about, your relationship with your producer is very key, because oftentimes the producer is looking at which actor is going to get money for me in the box office, or which actor which actor will sell the film at the heart of it, and which is a very valid reason, because at the end of the day, filmmaking is very expensive, and so you want to be able to recoup your investment. And it's now the director's job to kind of bring out the character within the actor, because like the actors, you kind of think of them as clay, like if you've ever done pottery, like you literally would mold the clay to what it fits like. And oftentimes, like they tell you that good casting, and it's of a truth, good casting is already like 60% of the job. So if a character looks, if the character looks and sounds like, or the actor looks and sounds like the character in the film already, and like when they give a line or when they're doing their rehearsal, they're already, like portraying the character, or embodying the character, then more than half of your work is done already. All you now need to do is kind of like start to craft, start to shape the character, and also make them consistent, because there's nothing worse than like an inconsistent performance, that the actor is acting a certain way halfway through the film, and then a completely different way for the other half of the film. And it's your job to make sure that it's consistent. It's your job to make sure that the motives that are in the script remain, like, are true, like, that kind of resonates through the actor's performance. It's your job to make sure that the actor also understands the motive. And some actors will challenge you on that, especially the good ones. The good ones will ask you, why? Why would he say this? Why would he do this? Or why would she do this? And it is up to you to now like create that dialogue. It's up to you to negotiate. It's up to you to now say, okay, I see what you're saying. How about we try this? I see what you're saying. How about we do this? And I think that's also where rehearsals are very important. And it's very, very, very important that you listen as a director. Very, very important that you listen, because like there might be things that you may have overlooked in terms of just trying to, I want to do this particular shot, and maybe for what the character is saying is not making sense, or they might just add something small to it and it literally elevates the scene. So yeah, so those conversations are very, very important. Those conversations with your actors, like explaining to them and being patient with them to explain to them why this character does what they're doing, why the motive behind all of this, like, and how this pretty much fits into the story. Because like sometimes, especially like if an actor is not, like if he's not the lead actor, some supporting actors, who are also very, very important. Some supporting actors might like over challenge it, but then because it is, you hold that vision, you hold the big picture in mind. Like, as I said, like you have the full film in your head, or from the script, you've seen all of that, and then you're now breaking it down. So you're breaking it down to the acts, you're breaking it down to the sequences. So the sequences is a bunch of scenes. You're breaking the sequences down to the scenes, and then the scenes obviously to the shots. So it is also your job to say, oh, remember that, oh, this is what is going to happen further down the line. I remember when we were making our first film, Roach, yesterday, which had like a lot of flashbacks. it was those were kind of the things that were happening, because like the actors would be like, oh, but why are we doing that? And I'm like, oh no, remember that this happens later on in the film. They're like, oh yeah, I get this. Okay, you know, and it is your job to constantly kind of remind them. It's your job to constantly keep that big picture in your head, and then rely on your crew as well. You know, your script supervisor in particular for continuity. Rely on them, because like the script supervisor pretty much would break down the script, would track the dialogue, would be the one to tell you what scenes you've completed during a shoot, because like oftentimes, like especially for feature films, and if you're doing it at a certain level, you're shooting for like 3 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks. By your second week, a lot of you are tired, you know, like you're middle of the story. You will never really shoot a film in sequence. So you're never really shooting it from scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, all the way down. You might start your first day, scene 25. The next day you're shooting scene 80 something, you know, and sometimes like you obviously like would switch, you know, like especially when you're a couple of weeks into shoot. So your script supervisor helps you to make sure that you're on track, and you understand how the sequence of flows and the flow of events is, as well as your first assistant director and second assistant director. So it's always very good to also rely on your crew, which is why, again, like I said, like those relationships between your crew and your cast are very, very important. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think so far so good. Like I think at this point in time, like just questions. Vincent, if you want to ask any particular questions, if anybody else wants to ask any particular questions, please do.
Is there anybody that wants to ask question? Because me, I'm enjoying this class. I don't want.
No questions. We can finish early, because I think.
Oh, please, no finish earlier. I like the class already. I don't want you to stop talking.
No, I've finished talking. No, I've tried.
So is there anybody want to ask questions? Any questions? So understand. Okay, I came today. You have a question. All right, you can ask a question.
All right, sir. So storyboarding or shortlist, which would you say is more preferred? I know you can use either of them, but which would you say is more preferred?
I think it depends on first of all the demands for the story, the amount of time you have for pre-production, and your style. I think I would always recommend a shortlist, because that kind of makes you like, that's a good preparation technique, and is not as complex or as complicated as storyboards. I, for one, don't necessarily use storyboards. I only use storyboards if it's like an action sequence. Like for my last film, Fourth Republic, we did storyboards for all of the sequences that had actions in it. And it's just a better visual tool in terms of communicating, particularly like with the cinematography, but also with the actors as well. But particularly with the cinematographer and the gaffers, so the lighting team. But again, like sometimes you might not have the budget, and unless you're a director that knows how to draw as well, sometimes you might not have the budget to actually have a storyboard artist to draw that, because like a storyboard obviously is like a comic strip. For people that don't know, it's like a comic strip of the scene. So it's like you're drawing out the scene, and where the camera is going to be. So it's pretty much for placement, for technical blocking, more than anything else. So it depends on, like, if there are some directors that like to storyboard, and I think obviously particularly if it's a very complicated scene, it always helps. As I said, I would only use it for like action sequences, because I like to walk through the sets. Like I like to walk through with the actors in terms of the blocking first. So we'll get to sets, I'll see them work first, and then now say, okay, this is where I want to put the camera. But some directors don't like to work like that. Some directors like to have like everything. For example, a director like Alfred Hitchcock, he literally storyboarded his whole films before they went to shoot. And it's just like, oh, you know, shoot, and then they know where to place the camera. So some directors like to do that, but again, it's whether or not you have the resources in terms of time and money. So even if you're a director that draws yourself, like it will still take you time to like pretty much draw out the storyboards, but they are obviously very useful for complicated scenes or scenes that require that have like action set pieces or a lot of movements with camera. It just makes the conversation with the DOP, with your DOP easier. Yes, I'm in trouble.
All right, thank you.
Any other question? I hear Tony Peters.
So you can unmute.
Yeah, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ishaya. Great section. You really, I mean, made this, it's like directing made easy course, you know, like you really like your use of words are really basic, and you made it so easy to understand. Thank you so much. Yeah, I want you to please expatiate on communication, as a director communicating with actors, because you know it's a creative field, and you know most of the time you have something in your head and you're trying to, you know, pass it on to the other person who also wants to creatively interpret what you are saying, you understand? So I just want to kind of probably throw more light into how to, I know you touched on it earlier, but like probably maybe techniques or something to help you, you know, I mean, get to the root of what you have creatively and to pass it on, even not only to actors, probably to also DOPs and other departments. Then another thing, I also wanted to touch on the rules of directors in post-production. Yeah, so after all the principal photography has been done and all that, so we proceed into post. Then how does the director relate now with the editor and, you know, I mean, in post generally? Thank you.
So, I mean, all pun intended, I think it's good to be direct in your communication, you know, like I think it's good to be as plain and as expressive, and if you need to repeat yourself, repeat yourself. I think particularly for crew, I think because like, again, like it's one of those scenarios where everybody has questions for the director, because like it literally is the director that has like the final say on set, in terms of where the camera is placed, in terms of whether or not you're going to do another take, you know, whether or not you're changing, you know, changing angles, doing another shot. I think it's very important to also kind of know the types of personalities that you're dealing with. I don't necessarily subscribe to the school of thought that you should be shouting or, you know, like even be insultive or insulting anybody on set. I think like respect begets respect. And if you show respect to, and obviously also be firm, if you show respect to your crew members, like they would also respect you back. But you also need to know what you want. So there is no, you don't want to like be flippy flappy or, you know, dilly-dallying or be unsure, because like if you're unsure, it also, and this is one of the things, especially if you're starting out in filmmaking, is like once you get into a creative set or a creative environment, there's a tendency for people to ride you, you know, there's a tendency for especially more experienced technical hands to say, oh, I want to do it this way, or I want to do it, you know, I want to do it this way, or I want to do it that way, or whatever the hell. And it's your job to also be very firm, you know, it's very firm, very direct in terms of what you want. Filmmaking is not a democracy. There's a hierarchy. There are heads of departments. There's a chain of command. And it's also very important to kind of establish that chain of command on set, because like everybody's pretty much looking to the director, like, and that command is literally, you would be weighing it with, like, particularly with the stars of the film, like with the actors, which is where your relationship with the actors now comes into play. And in terms of communicating with the actor, again, like being courteous, being direct, like making sure like they understand that, look, we're not here to party, we're not here to play. This is not play. This is serious business, And oftentimes, because to be honest, actors can be very badly behaved, especially our Nollywood actors, they can be very, very badly behaved. But it's also how you set this tone. If you're too playful, especially at the beginning, they will take the piss and they will just frustrate you. If you are also too strict, it might be a bit, especially if it's like supposed to be a lighthearted fair, or you want to add some humor into it, it might not translate as much. So you have to have that kind of, you have to find that kind of balance. That's where the art of it comes in. It's like that's you have to now pretty much understand people's personalities, understand the ones that you can just do it. And if you have like an altercation, like it's always very important to avoid altercations like on sets that has everybody listening in or looking at. So if you have an actor that's being difficult, or say even an actor that's just like forgetting their lines and the morale of the people are going down, you can just say, okay, guys, can we take 5 minutes, take the actor to a corner, have that conversation with him or her, or even if it's a crew member that is happening with too, is one of those things that just like emotional intelligence, very, very important. And obviously if there are moments where the set is a bit rowdy and you need to assert yourself, that you may need to do that and do that, but try obviously not to make it a habit, because like if there's always that shouting on set, like it creates a very tense environment, and those things are not necessarily good for creative productions. But at the heart of it is just making sure that you are always reminding not only yourself, but then everybody working on the production that this is work, and there are expectations, just as there are expectations for you as a director to kind of finish your days, like all the things you set out to do that day, you want to knock them out, so that you're able to make a film. There are also expectations on each and every member, and everybody needs to do their job. And that's what you also need to communicate. Like, look, you need to do your job. You're a sound, if you're the sound recordist, you need to make sure that, you have your SD cards, you have your batteries, if you need to charge it, your microphones are in good working condition, your cables, you have even spares. And these are things that you talk about in pre-production. If it's the camera team too, the same thing. Make sure your batteries are charged. You have the cards. Your digital image technician is there. Your this person is there in terms of like dumping the card or transferring the cards, backing up. All of these things are very important. And it's just important to be very direct, very clear with what you want, and know what you want. And again, it's still being open. It's good to be open for dialogue, open to other suggestions, because you don't know everything. And the beauty of our job is that you get to explore, literally, like you get to explore different stories, different cultures, different tribes, different traditions. And you get to explore just different places. So that's one of your the gifts of this. And then to your question about editing, obviously once you get into post-production, it's a similar thing. You want to be direct and clear. You want to be direct and clear in terms of what it is that you want in a scene. But you also want the editor to come, especially if you're not an editor yourself, like if you also want the editor to come with their ideas on how to make it better if you're not feeling it. And the thing with edits is more of a rhythm thing. It stops being like zeros and ones, or like hard, or I want this frames, or I want you to cut out 2 frames here or 5 frames there. It becomes like, how does this feel like? And that's what we talk about rhythm. If you read, there's the pretty much the editing Bible that we all have, is In the Blink of an Eye by Walter Murch, which is an editing book that's just really good, like it and talks about editing, and it's a very, very good, like that you kind of feel it, feel it. And to add, there's a question from Deborah that's just sent to me, that does the director need to know every technical aspect of, and I won't of using the camera in particular, but I'll just talk about like with every job, like the director doesn't necessarily need to know every technical aspect of, say, even editing or camera, but it's very, very good to know enough to have those conversations. It's very, very good to know the type of lenses that a camera uses, it's very, very good to know, like, so you can estimate, okay, this scene, I want to use a 24 mil here, or I want to use a 35 mil, I want to go tighter with an 85. It's very good to, like, that way, yeah, having that conversation with the DOP, and then you're yes, almost like speaking their language. And it's a similar thing even with the edits, like it's good to kind of, at least as much as possible, like verse yourself with the editing techniques, when you want to use a transition, why you should use a transition, when you want to use a hard cut. Yeah, if you want to start with a close-up before going to a wide, if you want to start with a wide before going to a close-up, the editor is also going to look at you for direction. But then again, it's a collaborative process. That's the beauty about filmmaking, is collaborative through and through. So your collaboration with the producer is to create this product, this film that you're going to now take to market. Your collaboration with the DOPs, you're going to create beautiful pictures with beautiful images. Your sound is the same thing with the performance, with the actors. You're trying to make sure that they have a performance that they are proud to put their name to. So it's a collaboration, and you as a director, you're that catalyst, you're that composer that's trying to like bring the best out of everybody. Yeah. So I have a JK, just before we answer you, I have a couple of questions. Here on the chat, how much is the director involved in each stage of post-production? Is there any parts that gets more of their attention? I think the director needs to be involved, like in particularly the edit. So like how we talk about edits is there's the offline edit and then the online edit. It's kind of changed over the last 10, 15 years, because obviously like the technology has become way better. Like the edit suits or the editing software that they use like 10 or 15, 20 years ago has become more accessible. So the idea of it, offline edits, was more like your normal cuts. So just like your, all the way to your fine cuts, like, so the main edits for picture and the sound edits that gets it to where the narrative has been told, and you have a picture lock and a sound lock. And then the online edits is mostly your grading, your color correction, and then your sound mix and dub. So it's like the balancing of the sound, the treating of the sound, adding atmos, adding music, just making it a polished film. And we don't, to be fair, in our industry, we don't do that a lot. There are very few films that kind of focus on that online aspect of it. So the director most of the time is involved in that offline aspect. The online aspect, the directors can be involved too, but those are mostly for the grading, and the color correction should be for the DOP to kind of decide, because they are the ones that kind of create the look for the film in conversation with the director. But sometimes like the producers and the directors too are there in terms of, okay, I want it to look this way and polished and whatnot. And obviously budgets too sometimes, because unfortunately producers don't really pay more attention. They don't pay a lot of attention to that final end, or at least they don't keep resources for that final polish. But that's very important. So yeah, so the director is involved in that offline stage. So in terms of how the film comes together, that is very important for the director to be there at the edits, both the picture and the sound edits. JK, can you ask your question before I go back to the chat?
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Joke, and I really appreciate this session. So far, it's been very elucidating. Thank you. My question goes thus. I know producing a movie is not a walk in the park, and I know you must have had one or two challenges in the course of producing at least a very good movie. Now, There are some situations that I feel the director, I just want to create a scenario now. You as the director and the producer on the other hand as a financier of a project says, this is a particular actor I want you to use for this production, but you have another actor that you know will bring life to the story and will do better than who the producer has in mind. Now the producer insists on that actor, but you also say no. This is a person that will do it better. Like we were looking towards the box office, and this person can give us what we want. How do you balance that aspect? Because I want to go into acting. I'm a newbie anyway, but I really have a passion for acting. That's number one. And two, I know the elderly ones, like the veterans among them, when you have a course to work with them, and they could take any small correction somehow. I know you understand what I'm trying to explain. I don't know how better way to put it. So how do you manage that aspect too? Then I want to know who is more important, the producer or the director? Thank you.
So I'll answer your first question and your last question together. Like, and that's what I talked about, like the relationship between a producer and the director, as very important. And again, I think this is the best time to just say, you pick your battles. That's the nature of collaboration. That's the nature of compromise. You pick your battles. There are times when you be like, okay, you know what, on this particular decision, we die here. And then there are times when you're like, okay, you know what, like, I can let you have this, but further down the line, I want you to do this, and that's where the negotiation comes in. And I think at the heart of it is you need to establish mutual trust and mutual respect. Because I think those are the two key things that with any successful collaboration, so whether it's even in making a film, whether it's running a business, whether it is, even friendship, that mutual trust and mutual respect. So if you have a producer that's trying to lean towards, okay, I want this actor in particular because of box office returns, like you wait, okay, do I really want to insist on having this person, knowing fully well that if the producer agrees that, okay, you know what, no wala, have this person. If there's another thing that you want further down the line and the producer says no, you have less of a negotiating capacity. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. And again, this is at the heart of it, is like how you pick your battles, how you pick, okay, you know what, this particular decision, I feel like it is essential that it goes like this, and so it's like you pick some, you lose, you win some, you lose some. And again, it's like how you have that relationship with your producer. Now, whether or not who is more important in the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. I think you need both to kind of survive. You need a good director, you need a good producer. At the moment, directors are more dispensable, especially in our industry, particularly is a producer's market. So producers have a lot more power, and you have more directors and more and more directors coming up. But yeah, I mean, like, I think that relationship is very, very important, like in terms of like explaining the reason why you think this is going to be a better choice. It's always like, and I think there should always be room for those kind of conversations. Like, listen, like I see why you're saying you want this person for box office returns. This is the reason why I want this person. And then you also address, okay, if this person is like, if you have a more popular actor or actress that you're saying you don't want to use, and you want to use a less popular actor or actress, you also have to create the argument of how you're going to return the money, or how you're going to create some sort of value that will come back to this thing, that will come back to the film. Jake, Joker, like you had another question. Sorry, I've forgotten the second question you had.
Okay, like dealing with the veterans in the game.
Oh, yeah, no, veterans. Again, is mutual respect, mutual trust. That's it. Like there will be some people that will be difficult for you, but then for the veterans and their professionals, sometimes it might, the downside is that it might eat into your production time. But obviously, like everybody else would understand, especially if you know what, like, again, I will keep on emphasizing, have your, just, pardon my language, have your shit together. Know what you want, be prepared, know how you are going to approach a scene. If you have a process, like, make sure that at least your process is like tried and tested. Learn, like, understand the script back and forth, know the story back and forth, have a good relationship with your technical crew, and once you come and you say, oh, I want to do this way, or I need you to do this way, even if when that friction comes in, because they're veterans, they've seen everything, and there's nothing worse for actors than working with an unprepared director or like an unprofessional director, because they just feel like they're wasting their time. You understand? So you also look at it from their point of view. And if they start to become difficult, it's one of those things that at the end of the day, or maybe at lunchtime, or when there's a setup that's happening, you can just call them aside and say, look, whether it's beg that you want to use to beg them, or whether it's like just being direct and plain and say that, look, right now you're really hurting the project. And this is what I'm suggesting that we do to, and be as plain as possible. Like, and I've been in those situations. I've been in situations where like a veteran actress, a very big veteran actress, like just was not working. And unfortunately we had to fire her. But I remember because I had the conversation with the producer and she was like, oh, I need to go and talk to her. And I was like, okay, no wala. And I went to go and sit down and talk to her. And I said, look, unfortunately, like, I've tried most of what I could do, but then this is not, it's a very, very uncomfortable conversation. Very, very, yeah, it was a very, very uncomfortable conversation, but it was also a very, very necessary decision to make. And it's also one of those things too that's you should also be able to do that. If an actor is absolutely not working, if they're being very disruptive to the set, or if their performance is just not even coming out the way it should, also consider, okay, maybe this is not working. Let's find another person. Great. I will come. Jide Akombi says, what is my perspective on going to film school versus your best film school is making your own film? Okay, versus your best film school is making your own film. Kai, I'm of two minds about, so I feel like with film school, they're good, but I feel like it's also, if you're at a certain age or at a certain point in your career. I had the privilege of going to a film school, and it was like one of the best decisions I made, and it was an amazing 2 years of my life. But I was 21, I think, when I got into film school. So I literally was just at the beginning of my career, and I think I had that opportunity. I had the support to go to, because film school is very, very expensive. I had the opportunity and I had the support. Would I have done it if I was supposed significantly older, in my late 20s or early 30s? I don't think so. I think I would have tried to just make a film, or at least, and especially now that there are all these resources. So from no film school to masterclass to studio binder, like there are all these resources that can help you and to aid you, and going on set too. So whether you want to just go and intern and learn under somebody. So if you're young and you have the support, absolutely, like I would definitely recommend film school. I'll also recommend it if you want to kind of focus on a particular technical aspect. So particularly like screenwriting, cinematography, and editing. Like I would say, if you want to do that, then do go to film school. I think for directing, and this was one of the best advices I also got before I went to film school, was do everything else apart from directing if you're going to go to film school. So like I was able to like literally do cinematography, do sound, do production design, which invariably helped me to have the conversations with all the heads of departments and be able to understand their own language as well. But if you have the support and you're young, definitely please like do it. But then if not, like you can carry that money and make your film, but then also make sure that you read and watch as much as possible and ask questions, try and get in touch with filmmakers, ask as many questions, go on sets, do the production assistant jobs, do and this is the beauty about our industry too, is that like once you get into a film set, like there's just so much work to be done. You can learn so many things. You can learn in terms of like script breakdowns. You can learn in terms of like short lists. You can learn in terms of, and yeah, and yeah, I know that sometimes some directors or producers can be difficult, but most of the time you can learn, and there are always opportunities to actually do a job, and learn on the job. So yeah, so as I said, I'm of two minds about it. Like I wouldn't recommend it. Like I even just had a conversation with a very young and exciting filmmaker, whose first film is coming out, and she's doing like really amazing stuff. And she was also like considering going to film school, and I kind of advised her against it, because she's just completed her first film, and her first film was going to do well. So I just told her like focus on workshops, on like master classes, for film festivals. So there are film festivals all around the world that go on year round. Like they have workshops. So like there's Berlinale Talent Campus. You can try and apply to something like that. You meet industry people, and you get to work with them. But film school also gives you discipline. It also, like, you are in a safe environment to learn, to fail, and to kind of hone your craft and create that discipline within your craft. So that's also like that has a help. Adeolu Dino says, hello, someone wants to send me a camera, but I understand uses DV tapes. I'm thinking it's not useful. I mean, depending on the style that you want to do, but then, man, if it's DV tapes, yeah, I'm not sure what you're going to use with it. I mean, if you want to create a particular style with the camera, yes, it can be useful for that. But then because you have to now either have a capture device or now like to transfer it in real time on your computers, there really is no point now. And with any camera with DV tapes, there's either shooting 1080i interlaced, some of them shoot 1080p, but the camera quality, the picture quality will look outdated and feel outdated. So that's why I said it also depends if that's the style you're going for, that it should look outdated or like old school. Then absolutely they should send that to you. Or if you just want to have it as a hobbyist thing, but like if you're going to shoot something with it and you want to like actually show it like broadcast, there are very few people that collect it unless it's your style. Another question, how do you manage your time to meet up every scene plan for the day? This is where you work with your first assistant director in particular. And yeah, and you keep track of it. So if you look at, you have to do 4 scenes in this day or 8 scenes in a day, pretty much by the time you finish your first scene, you kind of know whether or not you're going to make it. And it's now up to you to now say, okay, you know what, I'm going to collapse this shot. I'm going to add these shots together, and I'm going to kind of move quicker. And that's pretty much it. And your first assistant director now becomes very important in terms of making sure like the actors get into makeup on costumes on time, they come back, the lighting crew need like the time that they need, they're doing it, or so that they don't waste time. Well, all the departments, so whether art departments, whether camera, they take time to set up. So try to make sure that they are more efficient in it. And then also as a director too, it now comes to the point where you start to compress or collapse your shots together so that you're able to move through the scenes quicker. And then you now also come to that reality in terms of your scheduling as well. And this comes into your planning and preparation in terms of, okay, how can I schedule better? And how can I just make sure that I get through the day? Vincent, you want to ask your question?
Okay, I've been hearing about producers and that I'm not still difficult, but if you have your money to produce as a director, the dynamics change. Like you don't have anybody to report to about financially. When you're going to film, does the dynamic change for you? Does it become a good thing when you're producing and you have nobody to account to financially? Is it a good thing, or do you have is there consequences to it where you don't have anybody to be accountable to, and it becomes a problem?
So as you said, pros and cons. the pros of you being your producer and your director is that you don't have anybody to, be arguing with you on some, because there's some times that you just don't need to have that extra argument, on, okay, why I need this, why I need to do this. But the con of it is, again, you don't have that extra person to question your decision, and oftentimes those questions are very important. And as I said, it's a collaborative medium. So there are times that you see a film that's a bit too indulgent, and that's something that directors can do. They can be indulgent in terms of not having someone to like soundboard either like a financial decision or even like a creative decision. I like to work with creative producers because I like to also soundboard the ideas in terms of, okay, look, this is the decision I want to make. What do you think? And it's always good to have that kind of like, as I say, two heads are better than one. It's always good to have that kind of like a different perspective that I may not have thought about. And then like that keeps in check. But then obviously like there are projects that like I've produced and directed, and there are projects that I've worked with producers. You require a lot more discipline if you're producing and directing, obviously. Like you require a lot more discipline. There's obviously a lot more work on your hand, particularly when it comes to like going into markets, so taking it to an audience, and also obviously raising finance, which sometimes you just need that help so that you can just focus on the creative aspect of it. Because if you are thinking about the logistics of a location, how do I get this location? Okay, how am I pay, sorting this payment out or signing this check or approving this transfer at the same time as when you're rehearsing, you can understand how that can be distracting. So I find it's good practice that, okay, you know what, like always have a producer, and which is why, like, especially for the bigger films, you even see that there are multiple producers, because the bigger your film is, the bigger your project is, obviously the more complicated it becomes. And there are just so many different moving pieces. And by the time you get to shoot, literally you and we call it the burn rates. You every day of shoot, you're burning money. Like, so you're on the timer. So you have an actor that you've signed for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They're on the timer from day one. You have your equipment that you've rented, and the timer from day one. The locations, they're on the timer as well. Your crew, contract too, same thing, they're on the timer. So every day counts. Now, if you are doing both logistic and admin and at the same time creative, you would be stretched. Unless you obviously like are very, very organized, you're very, very detailed. Everything is like ticked and, ship shape. But oftentimes like that's not necessarily the case, and especially when you're like making a big feature film or even like a big TV series, it's always just good to have that extra person that you can bounce the ideas of. And again, as I said, like, it's the relationships, because like you don't want it to be a situation where the person is just challenging you for challenging sake, or you people are doing like an ego big dick contest type of thing. Now, I'm this, I'm producer, I'm director, my way to go and all that shit. Like, at the end of the day, it's like, what is best for the project? And that's something that I always like everybody I collaborate with. I said, like, look, we are coming together to do this, and it's going to be bigger than any individual person or any individual ego. And that's the heart of it. That's the reason why we come together to do this. Like, you're making a film that's bigger than your individual star or your individual director or your individual writer. And at the best, when it's at its best, like, you obviously are creating something that's just going to last for life. Yemiano.
Hello, good evening. My name is Yemi. And can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm an architect. How does budgeting affect your production, especially when you want to create certain scenes and maybe the executive producer decides not to just bring in more money, but yet you need to get that scene? Have you been in a situation where budget has affected any of your productions? Thank you.
I think this is where planning comes in again, and that's why I talked about the development process as that first place where you now start to like talk about financing. That's where you now start to put together a budget. And this is why oftentimes, like sometimes like films take very long to make, particularly like the big ones or the very good ones. Sometimes they take very long to make. How does budgeting affect you? Like it boils down to your planning. It boils down to your script and to your planning. Because like if your script has for example, like in our film Fourth Republic, we burnt a bus like in a school, like, and it was one of those situations where we looked at it and said, oh, do we really want to do this? Like, are we like, like, and it was, at least for me, like, it's like, oh yeah, like we do need, like, it tells the story and is important, is an important plot point. And we had to like figure out, okay, how are we going to like, make the budget work to capture a scene like that. And there are some other sequences that we had to take out because we just didn't have the budget for it. And I think that's the idea of it too, is like you also would tailor your script to kind of fit your budget. Like what is your actualized sum? Like what is your targets in terms of the budget? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be in a situation where you are making a very expensive film that you're not going to recoup the money back. So that's where the compromise comes in. And I suppose like it now becomes, how much do you want to make the film and how precious are you to the script? It's very, very important that at least you make sure that at least you have, ideally all of your budgets before you go into production, because like there are a lot of projects that have kind of stalled because their budget was 15 million naira or 20 million naira, but they only had like 10, but then they went ahead to start shooting. And that's why you have like a lot of producers either in debt or just in bad terms with their investors, because they had promised the world that, oh, this is what we're going to do in cinema, this is how much money Netflix is going to give us, blah, blah, blah. But then obviously that didn't come through or come to play. So it's one of those things that, like, again, your development and your planning stage is very, very crucial. It's very, very crucial to break down your script, have your script and then break it down and say, okay, you know what, this is how much it's going to cost to shoot it. Do we have it? Yes. Do we not have it? No. Okay, if we don't have it, how are we going to either tailor the scripts to fit that budget or get more financing? But it's like going into a business. This is where I look at it, like always, like it's like going into a business. If you're going to go and maybe whether start a pure water factory or maybe not, pure water factory is not a good example. But say you're about to create a product that that, okay, you know what, you want to take to market. You want to make sure that your cost of production is factored in. You want to make sure that your estimates and assumptions for your break even is also in line with what it is that you're putting in and what you're promising investors. So if you say, okay, I'm promising you ROI of 20% or 30%, you know where this money is coming from and where your ancillary rights are. And it's also like co-producing is also like a good idea too. We don't do that as much, but co-producing is that way you bring on another producer and they can help either offset the financial costs, or through their relationships, they can bring in other things that you may need. So for example, maybe logistics, you can have like, a hotel taking care of your accommodation, which offsets a huge amount of your budget. And this is where a creative producer comes in. So not only do they help in terms of like the story itself and then the storytelling, but then they also help in terms of the creative ways in which they raise financing. So whether they're getting grants, whether they are getting executive producers to invest, whether they're getting companies to like give some things gratis, like those are the aspects that now and that's the mix that you now try to do to be able to make a film. If you look at a lot of, say, I mean, the Oscars are today. So if you look at a lot of even like the Oscar films or films that do festivals, you will see a lot of companies, a lot of film funds at the beginning. And this is the reason why, because like, even though some of them are quite moderate budgets by global filmmaking standards, and moderate budgets are kind of between $5 and $20 million. they also need this kind of multiple sources of funds to come together to be able to make the film. So yeah, that like it's getting the amount of money that you need is always going to be that. That's where, you know, filmmaking is filmmaking. You know, it's not just our rudimentary style filmmaking that we're doing here that is niche, but when you now talk about like operating on a global scale, like those conversations now come into play, like the film funds you're talking to, the film festivals you're talking to, the co-productions you're trying to access, the rebates that you're trying to access, and those kind of things. That's where they come in.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. From your perspective, what do you think the movie industry in Nigeria?
Yo, I can't hear you properly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, in the music industry, the movie industry in Nigeria, where do you see it in 5 years? Okay, I'm not done with the question. I want to talk about green screen.
I can't hear you again.
I want to talk about green screen, using green screen.
Yes.
Do you see us adopting that anytime soon in Nigeria?
Do I see us adopting? Let me not just say green screen per se. Like, let's say like CGI, computer generated.
Yeah, CGI. Yeah.
Do I see us adopting it? Yeah, I think definitely yes. And where do I see? I'm very hopeful for the film industry. I don't know, and I suppose like maybe because I've entered the One Chance, and I'm building a career there. So for personal reasons, and the fact that I want to be able to continue feeding myself and my family with this job, or else I'll just go back to my village. Yeah, I'm hopeful and optimistic. I'm optimistic, particularly because particularly because of the music industry, and how that has grown in leaps and bounds, and how that has also like kind of tapped into a global like audience and markets. And I think like we also have that opportunity in front of us, and also that we have a very thriving domestic market as well. I think there's obviously going to be like there'll be more of a separation between the types of films that we have, more than we have now. Because obviously, you know, you have like your Iroko type films, stroke your Asaba films, and then you have like the ones that are trying to aspire to be better. I think obviously the streamers coming in and having interest with us is a good thing. I'm hoping that we take that opportunity as best as we can, because if we continue to have very poor films coming out, we will continue to drive the nominal value of our films. And if we continue to play in this sub $50,000, $100,000 markets, like there is really no film industry to build from, like at that, because like what you have, as you have now, is you have script supervisors in the UK or in the Netherlands or in Germany collecting more money than directors here. So if we're not able to build that value system or ecosystem, then that becomes problematic. But I'm hopeful because I have faith in the filmmakers, the potential of certain filmmakers to kind of make, and that's the heart of it. Like we just need to make good work. So the more good work we do, the more we're able to create that value. And as I said, like especially with music, is giving me the ginger, all pun intended, like that, okay, you know what, we can do this, you know, we can play at the big stage, you know, at the big field, and we can also do it through a variety of films or different genres of film as well. So that's where I see us in 5 years. And I think to your point, the question about CGI, I think, again, it's just a tool for storytelling. So whether you're doing an art film set in Maiduguri or in the border town in Kano, or you're trying to do like a very complex CGI film, like it's just a tool. And so whether you're going to bring in South Africans and Americans and, you know, British people to come in to do the CGI work for you, or you encourage people like the critics company, I think it's the critics company, those young boys in Kaduna that are Yeah,
Critics
that are
company.
doing, yeah, the critics company. Yeah. So whether we try and build them and like their capacity, like I think there's a lot of potential. But as I said, I'm being hopeful because like at the end of the day, 5 years from now, we can still forehand and people will now see me in bank. Hopefully not, but
Your phone.
you never know. You never know. Yeah, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic. That's as best as I can say.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Natasha, I thought you wanted to ask a question. I saw your hand up. Who else has a question for Mr. Ishaya?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I don't know if you've discussed this already while I was away, but is there a system in place where anyone who participated in the making of this movie gets to earn from the movie over time? Whether it's like an industry body or, I mean, one-off payments are nice, but there are some people who have invested in the making of the movie and would like to continue to earn from it or profit from it for as long as it earns or profits.
I think that boils down to your contract, really, and your negotiating power. And to be fair, like there are very few people within like any below the line crew definitely doesn't earn any money. Like below the line personnel doesn't earn any money. Even actors, like there might just be like 5 points shared between like all the actors. So if you're not a writer, director, or music composer, because those are the like main people, and apart from producers. So your writer, your director, music composer, and your lead cast. Those are kind of the main people that kind of have any back end deal for films. But yeah, I mean, like it depends on your contract. Like it depends on what you're negotiating. Like if you negotiate and say, okay, you know what, I want 5% on a film, I want 10% on a film. Like, yeah, like it's all dependent. It all depends on your negotiation. Those exist. Those have existed. I mean, like I've like kind of had those clauses in the films I've worked with, and continue to have those clauses. But yeah, it all depends on your negotiating skill and your negotiating power.
Do you mind if I ask? You said you've had those in some clauses before. Have they earned you like substantial amounts? Is it something that you would advise people to do?
I would advise people to do. Have they earned? I cannot comment on that at this point in time, unfortunately. But yeah, I would definitely advise people to do it. Like for me, like especially now, like it's the IP is just very important. Like having some sorts of share in the back end and the ownership, like it's very important. Yeah, it's very important.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Ugochukwu, does Ishaya Bako have a sort of mentorship program for young directors and producers? I mean, like Samuel has asked me the same question now. I'm just seeing it now. Can I intern or learn? Unfortunately, at this point unfortunately, and just because I have too much on my plate, unfortunately, I'm not like taking any interns or mentorship programs. I'm more than willing to give my time for conversations like this, which is about to end in 3 minutes. But because of just how busy my schedule is, at this point in time, I'm not taking anybody on.
I think I have another question, a very quick one.
Yes.
This is Yemi again. Do you intend transiting into gaming in future?
Into gaming?
Future, the nearest future.
Please, at this point in time, I can plug. Thank you, Yemi, for asking the question. I can plug our game. So we just made a game called Jaru's Journey. I'll put it in the chat. Deepak, permits me to put it in.
Go ahead, Shaya.
So there's a game called Jaru's Journey that we just made, and it's on Android and iOS. You guys, please download it. Check it out. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, Yemi, like interactive is where the world is going. So yes, we are definitely we're already there.
Okay, because I noticed that Autodesk and some other gaming engines like Unreal are getting involved with gaming now. I noticed that Mortal Kombat has stood the test of time, and they even translated into cartoons. I mean, now apart from the game, the cartoons has translated now. Now for Nigerian films and the way you see it now. I know it will be very difficult to pick films, but for your own movies, that is why I asked that. Do you see this working out in Nigeria as an industry on its own in the nearest future, standalone industry on its own in the nearest future?
I think definitely. Even Netflix, if you talk about Unreal and Autodesk, like even Netflix has gaming now. And I think like it was last year or 2 years ago that the CEO, Ted Sarandos, he was talking about how Fortnite, he was more worried about Fortnite as competition than Apple TV. Do I see it as an industry? Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we always would want to consume content, and I hate that word, but that's the only word I can use now. As long as we want to consume content, as long as we'll always have these devices, because these devices have become ubiquitous. The mobile phones, like everybody's life is now pretty much on their phones. And it's not just your communication device, it is your primary camera, it's just your everyday tool that you feel lost without. So there would always be an avenue for that. As also the way that the world transitioned from when your TV, everybody, at least for those of us that are still very old, when you're growing up, you couldn't pause or rewind, when it was time for Super Story, it was time for Super Story. That's what you're going to watch. When it was time for Build by Moonlight, it was time for, but now you have, catch up, you have Netflix, you have streaming, you have all of these that you can pause and rewind. And so we've moved from the traditional model of programming to on demand. And then now there's going to be interactive, or at least interactive that has existed for so long is becoming more accessible because of the devices in our hands. So yeah, would it be a standalone industry in Nigeria? I wouldn't say yes or no. I'd say it will exist. A market for it will exist in Nigeria just as it exists all over the world. Fantastic. On that cherry note, yes, good to see you, Dipo. I see you smiling. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Ishaya. And thank you, Mr. Ishaya. Mr. Ishaya, I'm sure there are lots of people here. I'm sure a lot of people want to reach your mails, and after this, if you will like, if you not be too much with your email or your phone number for people to reach out to you on this section, that's possible.
I can't give out my phone number, but I've just put my email on the chat.
Nah.
Yeah.
So yes.
I've just put my email on the chat. So if you want to email any questions and whatnot, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Ishaya for accepting to speak on very short notice. We really appreciate your time. You may not really understand the full impact of everything that you have said today, but I guess the best way to pay it forward will be in the quality of movies that you will see from people who are part of this cohort. So perhaps the best we can say now is watch out for us. It will be, as people release things, we'll share with you, just as a way of saying thank you for sharing your Sunday evening with us.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. I hope it has been useful. Thank you for inviting me. And happy Mother's Day to any mothers on the chat, on the call. All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Bye.
Good evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Me and you get talk.
Bye. Thank you.
No problem.
Don't worry, I'll chat you up.
No,
Bye.
All right.
Thank you everyone for attending. Bessie will be posting updates on the next activity that we'll have. So please just stay in touch for that. All right. So have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. God bless. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.